We've just lit a candle to wait for Messiah. And after that reading, I don't know for sure what we're waiting for. I don't think the world knows what we're waiting for. We get kind of caught up in all these things of war, whether it's over in the Middle East, whether it's the tensions that's happening within our society, whether it's the tension that's happening within churches. The dropping attendance, people seem to be more concerned about other things than the church, and we shake and we quiver and we say, the end time's coming. Well, you know what? The end time is going to come. Scientists tell us that. Whether it's a meteor, whether it's some kind of global warming mishap, whatever, we know that the end time is going to come. And I don't really think, as much as we put a lot on these few verses that are scattered throughout the Bible, I don't think the Bible's main focus is that. It's to let us know that, yeah, we agree with other things in this world that says that the world is going to end. But that's not our concern. The concern that the Bible has, I believe, is summed up in Jeremiah. This is what the messianic era is going to mean for the children of God. It is going to come. And there's a name for it. There's a name for him. There's a name for her. There's an identity. And it is the Lord is my righteousness. Or the Lord is our righteousness. It's kind of an odd name. But yet, within that name, there is a lot of impact. Within that name, there is a lot of identity of what God's expectation is for God's people. And that is to live righteously. To live rightly, thinking of others before we think of ourselves. And God tries to tell Israel again and again, and Jesus is trying to tell his disciples, that in that time of darkness, when all else around you seems to be falling apart, what better chance for us to have to light the righteousness of God than right then? He's not telling us to wait for that sweet by-by, to hide away somewhere in some cave, to be quivering and shaking over those things. He's saying, get out and let this light of righteousness shine here and now. And if you think about it, that's what Jesus' life was about. He gives hints of this time of things ending. He gives hints of his death, of his apocalyptic moment, if you will. When his world will come crashing down, where he will be literally nailed on a cross, he will be left to die, a suffering death on that, and he is going to show us how, even though he knows that's going to happen, how to live righteously. And for 3 years, that's exactly what he did in public. He lived rightly, thought of others, used his deityism, if you will, to serve others, not to turn rocks into bread so he could eat in the wilderness, not to show off by floating down from some temple, not to rule nations with an iron fist, but instead, this God incarnate lived in this apocalyptic time, this 3 years before his death. He lived it with a beautiful, wonderful love that was shown to all. Even the Pharisees who were going to see if they could have him crucified. Even before Pontius Pilate, asking questions that will cause that ruler to search in his heart what truth really is. And I think that's the key of this Christmas that's coming up. How do we live this life of this babe that is going to be born in a manger? How do we live this apocalyptic time, this messianic time? How do we live out the Lord is my righteousness, not just in here in the church, but in public? I don't know when the world's going to end. I don't know by what means it's going to end. I know eventually my world is going to end. Eventually I'm going to take my last breath as Jesus took his last breath. And I know that I will be part of that resurrection. That's been said and done not by me, but by Jesus Christ. And so the question is, Tim Buck, how are you going to live this life that you have been given so graciously before your end time comes? Don't worry about the end of the world, but before your end time comes. Jesus gave us a 3-year example. And how can we live? You see, I have had the opportunity to experience apocalyptic times. I had an opportunity to go down to Mississippi just a week after Hurricane Katrina. I saw the devastation. I saw people who were living that apocalyptic time. But I also saw people who were reflecting Jesus Christ in that apocalyptic time. I was taken into Biloxi, Mississippi, right after the storm, and it looked like a war zone. A woman named Linda took me in, and she and her pickup and a load of canned goods and cleaning supplies were there before FEMA, were there before Lutheran World Relief could get there. And she was giving people opportunities to have some sustenance and to be able to start cleaning up. It was such an understanding of who she was that even the National Guard would open the gates and let her in because they were familiar with her truck. And I remember driving down along the coast, and I was looking, I'm going, this is just a week since the hurricane landed. Did they already clean up? Because all I saw was some cement pillars where condos used to be, and some wooden pillars down here, and some metal pillars here. And there was nothing. It was clear, white, clean. And I said, did they come in and clean up already? She says, no, Tim, if you would look on the horizon, look at inland, he says, you see that white and gray bunch of stuff piled up about 3 miles in? And I said, yeah, I can see it. She says, that's the remnants of those condos. And she says, if you take a look out in the bay, she says, that's all the shrubs that they had around the condos. And I can see the sticks and palm trees just piled up outside or off the shore. And I said, what are these people doing? She says, well, the ones that are surviving are trying to figure out what to do. She says, but let's go in town. And we went into Biloxi. And it looked like a bombed out area. Houses were sideways. They were turned upside down. Somewhere in the middle of the street, there were casinos that were bigger than this building, that were 250 yards inshore, that were sitting between trees that they didn't crush because they were lifted up over and sat down. When we went into the residential areas, I remember passing a woman who was sitting on her porch. And we stopped and asked if there's anything she needed in canned goods or cleaning supplies. She says, well, I have some dry goods I've been eating. I'm fine with that. You can give that to someone else, but I could use some cleaning supplies. So I was helping her load into her house what she needed. And I'd introduced myself. And she said, Pastor, please don't think that I'm an idiot. I said, why would I think that you're an idiot? Because I stayed here. I said, I wouldn't think that at all. I wouldn't know what to do in this kind of situation. She said, well, this has been my house since I was a little girl. She said, I saw Camille and I survived that. And she said, I figured that Katrina couldn't do anything either, but then I remembered it was the high tide. She said, the first thing I did was swing the doors and windows open so that my house wouldn't float away like some of the other houses, because most of them are just sitting on foundations. She said, but as the water came in the house, I realized I had nowhere high to go. And so as the water was starting to suck me out the door, I put my little dog in my bra. She said, and as I passed the doorpost, I grabbed onto it. She said, I held onto that for 2 hours. I said, 2 hours? She said, yeah. She said, and I prayed, and she said, and I cursed at God. Why would He let this happen? And then I started to apologize to God. I said, for the hurricane? She says, no. She says, I started to apologize because about 10 years ago, I started to ask God why He let me be a landscaper all these years, all my adult life, out in the sun, working until my muscles ached. But as I held on to that doorpost for 2 hours, I realized I and my dog would have been swept away if it wasn't for that blessing of being in the landscape business. She said, and my blessings became a blessings for the community. Because I think you notice as you go through here, houses are misplaced. Some are upside down, some are in the middle of the road. I'm sure you drove around them. And most of those people are gone, but they come back to work on their property to figure out how to clean it up. And she says, you know what? My house becomes a bunkhouse for those people. I have an opportunity to offer them shelter. I have an opportunity to show them the blessings that God has given me. And as I went through these readings, I thought, well, this is a woman who's living in between times, in between the finite and the infinite. And even though she had her apocalyptic moment with Hurricane Katrina, instead of worrying about the sweet by and by, she thought about how she could affect and impact society right now. When they were in their darkest time, her neighbors saw a light with her as she opened up her door and invited them in. As she gave them meager food that she had, as she revealed the love of Christ. And again and again and again, as I drove around Biloxi and Ocean Springs, Mississippi, I heard the same story. And I'm thinking, wow, this is what Jesus is telling us as the church. This in-between time, this time when we know that the end is eventually going to come, Jesus is saying, live it out as the light of God. Is the light of the kingdom. Live it out here and now. And we hear the same thing coming out of New York, whether it's the water lady that takes water up to the 6th and 7th and 8th floors of apartment that's mostly for the elderly, or whether we hear churches that gather together in the dark without electricity, singing hymns of the coming of God, and then going out into the communities and seeing how they can help people rebuild their lives. That's how the end times are to be lived out in the church. That's how we're supposed to let the light of God shine, the light of love that has been given to us, and the light that we are challenged through the Scriptures to share for others. We are to be, the Lord is my righteousness. It's not just set aside for Jesus. It's set aside for all of us. So when the hours get their darkest, the church shines its brightest. I believe that that's what this Advent season is about. Yes, we're lighting a candle and we're waiting for Messiah, but that candle is just not supposed to stay here in the sanctuary. It's supposed to go out into the community. So when this time, this end time, these dark times, when there's rumors of war, when there's rumors of upheaval in the earth, whether it's plate tectonics, whether it's a meteor, whatever, the church shines with the love of God that has been given to us through Jesus Christ. Come, Emmanuel, come. Be in our midst so that we can be in the midst of our community. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.